Today's speaker, Kate Cohen, is a Washington Post columnist who writes about the intersection of culture, family, and politics. She has been interviewed on NBC Nightly News, Free Thought Radio, and the BBC World Service. She's also the author of two previous books, one being the Nepi Madonna Diaries, Reading Jewish Survival Through My Italian Family, which tells the story of a Jewish family who went into hiding to survive the Nazi invasion, and explores Kate's own perspective as a post-Holocaust, non-believing Jew at the end of the 20th century. The other book is A Walk Down the Aisle, Notes on a Modern Wedding, which examines through personal essays a hard-to-resist but functionally outdated American wedding ritual. Her latest book is We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too. The book chronicles Kate's journey from Reformed Jew to outspoken atheist, which is what today's talk is about. And I present Kate Cohen.
Hello. First, I want to say thank you to Don and Frank and Sue, everyone at the Capital District Humanist Society made this possible. I'm honored to be here in person. Yes. It's very, very easy to stay home. And if you are home, it's very, very easy to do things other than sign into a talk in the middle of the day on a Sunday. So it feels like a small miracle that everyone is here. But like every miracle, it's actually the result of human effort and intention. So thank you for that work. And thank you to the audience both here and choosing to join us virtually. You've got a lot of other things you could be doing. I know that. I'm going to talk about the idea that America needs atheists now more than ever, which is one of the conclusions of my new book, We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too. But first, let's talk about what an atheist is. An atheist is me, as a Jewish child in Virginia, sitting in synagogue, not believing a word I was saying. On Friday nights when we lit Sabbath candles in synagogue on high holidays and for Sunday school and at my bat mitzvah ceremony, I said and did everything I was supposed to, and I sang with gusto. For those of you who don't know, the Jewish liturgy involves a lot of praising God. Whether it's Saturday or a rite of passage or a holiday, you're pretty much saying over and over again, "Blessed art thou, Lord, our God, King of the universe." And then you just swap out the things you're praising him for. Candles, wine, the Torah, military victories. So I must have praised him thousands of times, but I never believed that God was real, that there was a supernatural being up there listening to me pray. To me, God was a sometimes villainous, sometimes heroic, fictional character with a lot of power and a desperate desire to be worshipped. So an atheist is me as a child in Virginia, a college student in New Hampshire, and a young adult in Albany, New York, totally keeping that idea that God was a human invention to myself. Why? I think I just wanted to be a good girl. I had nice liberal parents. I went to a nice open-minded college. I moved to a part of the world. It would have been perfectly safe to say I didn't believe in God. But, you know, what if people didn't like me? What if they thought I was a bad person? I grew up in America, after all. My money said, "In God we trust." And my classmates and I stood every day to pledge allegiance to one nation, indivisible, under God. I read for context clues, and I understood that a good person, a likable person, a normal person believed in God. Americans believed in God. We don't really know how many atheists there are in America. About 4 to 6% of Americans have called themselves atheists in a survey. Between 19 and 26% of Americans have told pollsters that they don't believe in God, including at least some people who also go to church or synagogue or the mosque. Only 49% of Americans believe in the God of the Bible, but at least some of the nuns, that fast-growing group of Americans we hear about all the time, who aren't affiliated with any religion, at least some of them do believe in some kind of God. So are people who don't think a supernatural being is in charge of the universe a tiny minority, or are they most of us? The data are confusing, and I think that's partly because people are reluctant to admit to being part of a minority that is feared and reviled. Who wants to tell people they're the sort of person that people don't like? Polls show that Americans don't trust atheists, don't want to vote for us, and don't want their children to marry us. Studies show that even atheists think serial killers are more likely to be atheists than believers. We're suspicious of ourselves. So I was an atheist, but I kept it to myself because I didn't want to be thought of as immoral or amoral. I wanted people to like me. But another reason it took me so long to call myself an atheist was because I thought it was more complicated than it really was. That being an atheist meant being and doing things that didn't suit me at all. It's not complicated. In fact, I made a list of all the things atheists don't have to be and do. So let's start with one of the basics. Number 1, you don't have to be a man. If you picture an atheist, not me, that's cheating. Most people think Richard, Dan, Sam, Christopher, or the funny ones, Ricky and Bill. In fact, more men than women do identify as atheists, but I think that's because women face more pressure to get along with people and to make nice. Or they think that being an atheist is a male thing to do. But you don't need to be male or even to possess any stereotypically male characteristics to be an atheist. You don't have to have a fatherly beard or a big brotherly sneer. You don't have to be aggressive or argumentative. Even if you are a man, you don't have to be ready and willing to lecture other people about how dumb religion is, or conversely, how they're doing atheism wrong. Number 2, atheists don't have to be strict materialists. You can be a whole person. Atheists can feel gratitude, just like believers. We can be guided by a strong sense of right and wrong. We can feel awe as we look out at the world. We can feel blessed to be alive in it. We can feel hope for the future, and we can even have faith in other people. Some people say they believe in God because they believe in wonder and in a kind of cosmic oneness that reveals itself to them in delightful coincidences or their own good fortune. That's not believing in a supreme being, though. That's having big feelings about big things and giving those feelings the biggest word we have for them in this culture, which is God. But they're still atheists. Number 3, you don't have to study up. You don't have to know how the universe began or why bad things happen to good people or what the meaning of life is. You can reject belief in God as the answer to these questions without first coming up with other ones. Now, if you were trying to convince me to believe something, sure, yes, the burden of proof would rest with you. If you were trying to convince me to pray to a supreme being I can't see or make laws based on the wishes of a deity as conveyed in a book of uncertain origin, well, then you might have some explaining to do. If not, though, you're allowed to just look around at what other people believe and say, that seems made up. Being an atheist doesn't mean you're signing up for debate. All atheists should practice saying, no, I don't believe that, or no thanks, or nah. If someone asks you how the Big Bang happened, you can say, I don't know. You are not required to say why you don't believe in the one creation story someone is telling out of all the possible creation stories. You can just say, oh, a story. Back to my story for a second. So, as I said, I was raised Reformed Jewish and I acted Reformed Jewish all the way through my Jewish wedding. I didn't join a synagogue as a young adult, but that's pretty common. A lot of young people don't return to their houses of worship until they have kids. And then they feel that to be good parents, they have to raise their children in a religion. For me, it was the opposite. Instead of making me seek the faith of my upbringing, having children made me realize, finally, that I didn't want to pass along to my children things I didn't believe. And I didn't believe that God was anything other than a very popular human invention. So that's what I told them. And I'll read you that scene from the book. The chapter is called Thunderbolt. I can tell you the exact moment when I started to raise my children as atheists. It didn't feel momentous at the time, but it was a moment. Noah was 5, Jesse was 3, and we were sitting on the couch reading from D'Aulaire's book of Greek myths, a holdover from my childhood bookshelf. Those illustrations really freaked me out as a kid. It's one thing to read that Cronus ate his babies, but it's quite another to see it. So naturally, I had to share the experience with my boys. Sure, parenting is about helping your children navigate the world, but it's also about facing your demons while protected by total adoration and small, warm bodies clad in footy pajamas. Anyway, one of the boys asked what a myth was, and I told them it was a story about how the world works. People used to believe that these gods were in charge of what happened on Earth, and these stories helped explain things they didn't understand, like winter, or stars, or thunder. See, look, I flipped ahead to find a picture. Zeus has a thunderbolt. They don't believe them anymore? No, I said. That's why they call it myth. When people still believe it, they call it religion. Like the stories about God and Moses that we read at Passover, or the ones about Jesus and Christmas. They're just made up stories, like myths, but people still believe them. God is made up. That's what I told my kids. Note that I didn't say some people think God is made up. No one knows for sure. This is because, number 4, atheists don't have to be any more certain that God does not exist than they are that monsters don't exist. Being an atheist does not require a higher standard of proof or certainty. There's no way to prove there's no God, right? Since he's supposed to be invisible and intangible and work mysteriously, especially during school shootings, you can't disprove his existence. And some people feel intellectually dishonest, calling themselves atheists in the absence of proof there's no God. They're reluctant to say there's no God because there is a God, just an argument from faith. But they are not reluctant to say there is no little green Martian guy. There is no swamp thing. There is no fairy godmother. To be an atheist, you don't have to be any more certain about the non-existence of God than you are about the non-existence of other imaginary creatures. This is from a chapter called, Sorry, Honey, God's Just Pretend. One day, in the middle of doing her math homework at age 9, after having heard a casual remark I made to her father, my daughter paused, pencil poised, to ask me the obvious, but as yet never asked question. How do we know there's no God? It's a question atheists get asked all the time, often by people who think we should use that gentler term, agnostic, people who are comfortable with doubt and suspicious of certainty. In answer, I would say that all evidence points to the fact that God is a popular and useful fiction, and that no evidence points to the fact that he actually exists. But how do we know? Where's the evidence that he doesn't exist? That's what Lena was asking for. And that's what leaves many people wary of leaving the agnostic camp. And it's what makes many parents, even those willing to call themselves atheists, decline to issue definitive statements to their children. Even people who accept my atheism with a shrug object to the idea that I teach my children there is no God. No one taught me to be an atheist. After all, I came to my own conclusions. Shouldn't my children get the opportunity to assess the facts and decide for themselves? The fact that only one of my 3 children ever challenged me on this point underscores the great and awesome power of the parent. How can these kids possibly decide for themselves when their all-powerful mom has decided for them? It's true, I stacked the deck. There's always the chance my children will experience a late life conversion, but like smoking, belief in the supernatural is a habit far less likely to be picked up by adults than by kids. So chances were good that teaching my kids there was no God would likely result in their not believing in God. I can't prove that God does not exist. So how can I teach my children as fact something that cannot actually be proven? Well, I can't prove that monsters don't exist either, but I have no trouble saying to my kids, monsters are pretend. What, after all, is the alternative? Mommy, are monsters real? Well, honey, I don't believe monsters are real, and neither does your father. Certainly, we've never seen one, but a lot of people do believe they are real. What do you think? Of course not. Monsters are pretend. No one would accuse me of indoctrinating my children with a non-belief in monsters or of brainwashing them with my skepticism about the paranormal. And yet that's precisely what happens when the subject is God. If you're really not sure, this is me now, this is me in the present, not me in the book. If you're really not sure, if you really think it's possible that there's a supernatural being in charge of the universe, then fine, call yourself an agnostic, a not knower. But if you think the actual existence of God is only monster level possible, then I assure you, you know enough. You know there's no concrete evidence of God's existence, and you know there is a vast diversity of myths, religions, and deities across time and cultures. You know people want God to exist. That shouldn't stop you from looking out at the world and saying to yourself, this God thing seems made up. And if you ever receive evidence to the contrary, then by all means, change your mind. Number 5, being an atheist doesn't have to be a cause, a job, or even a hobby. This is from the book again. Even people who are clear in their own minds about the fact that God is made up may avoid calling themselves atheists because it seems like so much work. Your presumed atheistic responsibilities are extremely time-consuming. After you complain to the school board about the daily recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance and sue the town for its pre-meeting prayer policy, you have to picket a Christmas display, debate a Jesuit, carefully restamp all the "In God We Trust" mottos on your paper money with E pluribus unum, and try to convince your grandmother not to go to church. It's a full-time job. Atheist even sounds like a career. What's up with the kids? Well, Janie is a nutritionist now, and Abby just got certified as an atheist. She has her own practice down in the city. Even I, the person standing up here making a speech about being an atheist, the person who wrote this book, am capable of going whole days without thinking about the fact that God is a human invention. Number 6. Atheists are not required to think that religion is dumb or evil or responsible for all that is wrong with the world. I've written columns on why I don't think a Christian school should be given a public school charter, on how I don't understand why religious belief should be a get out of laws free card, on why people seem to think it's fine for religious organizations to discriminate, and on and on and on. And even I don't think religion is necessarily a bad thing. What's bad is the special deference we give it. the way we allow people to use it to hurt other people. But people also use religion to help other people. People use it to organize their lives, connect with one another, console themselves. And I'm sympathetic to that. A good half of We of Little Faith looks at everything people get or think they get from religion and examines how atheists can replace them. Religion is a human invention, but it was invented for a reason, for several reasons, not all of them to oppress women and sanctify the status quo. So part 2 of my book talks about all the good things that religion gives people or promises to give people and how atheists can get that too, as parents, but also just as human beings. I think these chapters are a lot of fun. And I get to quote everything in them. I get to quote everything from Epicurus to C.S. Lewis to Simone Biles to Kevin Durant. And although I do come to some conclusions, I'm very compassionate about how hard it is to get through life, to raise kids, to get along with your family, and also how lovely and comforting some aspects of religion can be. So the final item on the list of rules atheists don't have to follow is number 7. Atheists don't have to give up Christmas. For a book by an atheist Jew, We of Little Faith has a lot of Christmas in it. In part, that's because Christmas is kind of a shorthand for the culturally religious soup we all live in and the questions that raises. How do we live in the world? How do we relate to our neighbors? Honestly, it's okay to put up a tree to celebrate the holiday of a deity you don't believe in. It's okay to sing the hymns at a funeral mass. It's okay to make matzo ball soup at Passover, even if you think the book of Exodus is both fictional and horrific. You don't have to take a vow of purity to be an atheist. Okay, so let's recap. You don't have to be a man. You don't have to give up joy or wonder or good manners. You don't have to have a PhD in evolutionary biology. You don't have to be more sure there's no God than you are sure there are no vampires. You don't have to do atheism like it's a job or a hobby. You don't have to hate religion. And you don't have to give up Christmas or other family traditions. You can even be a humanist. All you have to do to be an atheist is believe there is no supernatural being in charge of the universe. It's that simple. But knowing you're an atheist and saying you're an atheist can still have a big impact. When I first started writing We of Little Faith over a decade ago, I was really making an argument for people to be honest with one another in their personal lives, for parents to be honest with their children, for children to be honest with their parents. For me, it was such a relief to get to talk to my kids about the big questions in life without having to pretend that I thought or there might be a heaven or a God. We could face the confusion and the dread and the joy of life together. Not only that, but the more I gathered the courage to tell people outside my family that I was an atheist, the more I found that people generally responded with stories about their own doubts or lack of faith or religious upbringing. I'd been hiding the truth because I was afraid of cutting myself off from people, afraid of disconnecting. But telling the truth turned out to be an incredible path to connection. Still, though, that's a personal reward. It's not a political one. And as the years passed, and as right-wing Christianity tightened its grip on our laws and our courts, I became more and more convinced that our cultural habit of deferring to religion, granting legal carve-outs to religious institutions, listening to politicians talk about God and the Bible, politely acting as if we all more or less believed in a higher power, was a habit we needed to break. America needs atheists, all of us, the nice moms, the nurses, the grandpas, the grocers, to say we're atheists, because the more we do, the more atheists we inspire to do the same. The more we say and make it normal to say that God is just pretend, the more we push back against the idea that God should have anything to do with public policy or public money. That my neighbor's religious belief should have any effect on me. There may be more nuns in America than ever before. People may be leaving their churches in droves, but religion is right now claiming and gaining an astonishing amount of political power. And that's a problem because religion lies at the core of discrimination against LGBTQ people. Religion lies at the core of control over women's bodies, from dress codes that punish girls for male desire all the way to the Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade. Don't say gay laws, laws denying trans kids medical care, school library book bans, all motivated or excused by religion. And then there's the campaign to redefine the idea of religious liberty, which once referred to the freedom to worship or not as one saw fit, and now refers to the freedom to follow US law or not as your religion sees fit. Religious belief, more and more at the state and federal levels, is a way to sidestep advances the country makes in civil rights, human rights, and public health. In 46 states and the District of Columbia, parents can get religious exemptions from public health law that requires children to be vaccinated. 7 states allow pharmacists to refuse to fill contraceptive prescriptions because of their religious beliefs. Exemptions and exceptions abound. Every business with a federal contract has to comply with federal non-discrimination rules, unless it's a religious organization. Every employer that provides health insurance has to comply with the Affordable Care Act's contraceptive mandate, unless it's a craft supply store with Christian owners. Case by case, law by law, our country's commitment to the first right enumerated in our Bill of Rights, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, is faltering. The Supreme Court has ruled that the citizens of Maine have to pay for parochial school, that a high school football coach should be free to lead a prayer on the 50-yard line, that a potential wedding website designer can reject potential same-sex clients. This past summer, Oklahoma approved the nation's first publicly funded religious school. And this fall, Texas began allowing schools to employ clergy members in place of guidance counselors. Meanwhile, we're losing hold of one of the most, our new Speaker of the House, has said that God has put him there.
What?
Our new Speaker of the House. I'm sorry?
Said what?
Oh, I'm sorry. That God has put him there.
That's what?
God has put him there.
Oh, thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, yes. That his position on every issue can be found in the Bible. That America is a Christian nation, and that Christians have a duty to bring government, quote, under the sway of the principles of righteousness. A week ago, he sent out a fundraising letter for the National Republican Congressional Committee that reads, in part, I fear God may allow our nation to enter into a time of judgment for our collective sins. The only question is he going to give us one more chance to restore our foundations and return to him? The only question is, how can Republicans not push back on that? How can they not say a peep about it when Trump says at a campaign rally that when he's president again, there'll be ideological screening for all immigrants. And if you don't like our religion, we don't want you in our country and you're not getting in. I believe there are far more atheists in America than we think. Far more people who simply don't believe there's a supernatural being in charge of the universe. And I believe that saying so to ourselves, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our politicians, and to pollsters will ultimately help push religion back out of our schools, our hospitals, our FDA approval processes, and our laws. For America's sake, we need more Americans who are willing to say, nah, seems made up. I believe atheists are in a unique position to fight back against Christian nationalism, but I think America needs us for more than that. This rabid, nasty, discriminatory, violent strain of Christianity is going to fall. I do believe that. I think Election Day showed that. They've simply gone too far. My heart breaks for all the people who will lose their freedom and their lives before we get reproductive rights back and repeal laws that were passed to punish trans people. But I think America might be waking up and noticing that someone's trying to take away their freedom, and it's not Joe Biden. America needs atheists in that fight, yes. But America also needs atheists after this fever has passed. Because the one thing atheists know is that there's no divine justice. There is no God's plan. And knowing that makes us more active, more involved citizens. The nuns as a group may be checking out in some ways, but atheists are dialed in. I want to read you one last little bit from my book, and then we can have questions. This is from part 2, which, as I said, addresses each of the benefits that religion promises to give and tries to figure out whether atheists need it, and if so, how we can get it. So I have chapters on death. I have chapters on holidays and churches and morality and rites of passage, even prayer. The final chapter of this part is called Unplugging from the Higher Power. It's about accepting the fact that God isn't in charge, which is the one thing that atheists definitely have to do. You can still enjoy the trappings of your religion. You can still enjoy Christmas and Hanukkah. But if you're an atheist, you have to accept that the world is what people make it, not God. So here goes. The section is called Thoughts and Prayers. And I refer at some point to a school called Mott Hall Bridges, which is a very poor school district in Brooklyn. Few American events are as grotesque as the massacre of school children by guns. In these moments, I will not contest it, religion appears to offer consolation. Angel Garza said of his murdered 10-year-old daughter, "My little love is flying high with the angels above." Part of me hopes that all the parents of children lost to gun violence are believers, that for the rest of their lives, they live in an alternate reality, knowing that their children continue to live happily after their deaths, watching out for their siblings. But I hope the rest of us know that's not true, or at least that we act as if it isn't. Because I've just thought of something more grotesque than a massacre of school children, the repeated massacre of school children. Best case, belief in God gives people solace when something terrible happens. Worst case, it allows them to shirk their very real responsibilities to one another while offering thoughts and prayers. Most people understand that bad religion that preaches hate and shame, has done terrible things, from slaughtering people who worship other gods to enabling sexual predators to withholding condoms in AIDS-ravaged countries. Bad religion is responsible for some of the worst things that people do to one another. But what about good religion? What about religion that clearly means no harm, tries to heal the world, or at least a small corner of it, and even inspires people to give up drinking or start a school for poor students, to stay afloat until the Coast Guard comes, to make it through another grief-racked day? Bad religion endorsed slavery and sanctified racism, but didn't good religion fight for abolition and lead the civil rights movement? Yes. Good religion has sometimes led us forward, but in the long run, it could still be holding us back. We may not want to think about it or admit it, but we have the power to save not just Mott Hall bridges, but all the schools that struggle to help kids in impoverished areas. We have the power to end poverty. We can end the epidemic of gun massacres. We have the power to regulate gun ownership, to outlaw civilian possession of military-style weapons, to buy back AR-15s, to hold gun manufacturers financially and legally liable for the carnage. Australia stopped it, New Zealand stopped it, England stopped it, Norway stopped it. But we can't stop it if we believe that a massacre is simply God calling his angels home. If we believe he has a mysterious plan that involves children hiding among their friends' dead bodies to keep from being shot themselves. We have to believe that what controls the circumstances of one human's life is humans, not just individually, but in the systems that we create together. Talking as if God were in charge encourages us to act as if he were. As if the difference between rich schools and poor schools, as if the next school massacre were not ultimately our responsibility. But they are. The future of kids like Vidal, that I spoke about, is not in God's hands. It's in Lopez's hand, or in Lopez's hands. It's in ours. The next school massacre will not happen on God's watch. It will happen on ours. So that ends my little presentation, and I would love to take your questions about anything, whether it's about celebrating the holidays as an atheist or anything. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I see lots of questions in the room.
Okay.
Fred and Sherry online had beat you to the punch.
Oh.
So we're going to let Fred and Sherry, can you unmute yourself and have your comment question?
I look at right in there.
Fred, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear.
Wonderful. You're a very pleasant speaker. I want to thank you for articulating our truths very nicely and concisely. What I'd like to comment on is when you become an outspoken atheist, as opposed to an internal or invisible atheist, if you're working to repeal laws, giving preferential treatment to religious organizations, I believe that's where you start with resentment from the two factions, the believers, non-believers. I would wonder if you could address that or give your opinion on that, please.
I guess that's a really good question. I would start with aiming at the laws where I felt religion was overstepping in terms of trying to affect other people's lives, getting beyond its own, not so much surviving as a religious institution and not paying church taxes, but getting into the public schools, getting into the doctor's office, any place where by law, by use of the law, very narrow. A very narrow concept of, say, right-wing Christianity is actually having an effect on everybody else. So I think I would start there. I sort of agree with you that, trying to take the financial support out of every religious institution would not be great PR. So.
We have a question here. Two questions in the room, and then we have a couple more. And then Sherry, you're after the couple more. So we'll get to you in a minute.
Okay, fine. Can you tell me, do you know when, how, and why under God was inserted in our Pledge of Allegiance?
As far as I know, it was early in the Cold War. It was in the 50s. Okay, yeah.
And what was the point?
The point was to make a distinction against the atheist,
Communists.
godless communists.
you.
Exactly. And I, of course, think that the amazing, incredible distinction that our country holds is that it was founded as a secular country, and it specifically, you know, in the Constitution forbids the establishment of religion of, you know, in the public sphere. So,
And to this day,
yeah.
I do not say under God in my Pledge of Allegiance,
Good for
which I
you.
grew up not having to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate on that. It's your right to not say the Pledge of Allegiance at all. So, okay. Okay, next, we have a question from Frank in the room, and then from Frank, we're going to go to a couple people online.
First, I want to thank you for coming in person. This is the first time in almost 4 years that this organization has had an in-person speaker. Thank you.
Oh, look, there's a whole lot of.
Second, this is more of a commentary, but you can comment. What you said about your childhood and upbringing, Jewish,
Yes.
resonated a lot with me because it was very much my experience too. I was bar mitzvahed,
Mm-hmm.
and my feeling at the time was that there was something wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
that I was a bad person for not believing what everybody else was believing. And also, when I got up there in front of the synagogue to do my bar mitzvah thing, I felt that I was a fraud. I was being a fake, and I felt guilty about that. Maybe you could comment.
Well, you were ahead of me, I think. I absolutely assumed that everyone else believed what they were saying, which now I look back and I think, well, that's crazy. Why would I think that? I didn't. So I could, like, you know, extrapolate. But I would say at the time I felt more, you know, like it was a performance, like I was being a good person, not a bad person. I did not feel like a fraud. I felt like, oh, I can make this make sense in my head metaphorically. I can make it make sense in my head figuratively. I was a big reader and I did that sort of thing all the time. So it just, to me, it was, you know, on that continuum. And so that's how I thought of it in my head, not the fact that I was like literally leading people in praise of, you know, a God I didn't believe in. That part came later. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to go to a couple people online that had raised their hands, and then Sherry, after two, we'll get to you. So
Where's
Teddy,
Sherry?
could you unmute yourself and make your comment or question?
Hi, yes. I am curious. You mentioned the nuns. I haven't
Yeah.
heard of them. Can you expand on that a bit?
So the nuns, it's N-O-N-E-S, I should have clarified, N-O-N-E-S. These are the people that when there's a survey about religious belief, answer, oh no, not Jewish, not Protestant, not Catholic, not Muslim, nothing in particular, or none. Answer none to the question of what religion are you affiliated with. So it's a question of religious affiliation. And it's the nuns as a share of the population has really grown very quickly over the last 20 years. I mean, it's quite remarkable. I think it's now maybe 30% of the population, but I will find out for you for sure. So that's what
so it's not actually a group you can join. You're just either in it or out of it. It's not like
it's a group defined by not.
Gotcha. Okay.
What was the group called?
I think the interesting about that to me is that some of those people may well believe in God, but they are just not willing to claim an identification with another actual organized religion.
You don't necessarily get a membership card to be able to be a nun.
It might be a cool one to be.
Okay, so Harry online, you had a question? Could you unmute yourself?
Sure. Hi, thank you for a great presentation. I'm in the process of moving into the Capital District from Long Island, New York, and I just signed a lease, and in the next
Great.
month or two, I should be moving my online business there.
I want to get
I-
the speaker view.
I enjoyed your talk very much, Kate. It was
Great.
very, very informative. When I became a citizen
that's an
about
audience.
35 years ago, a naturalized citizen, and I had to say the Pledge of Allegiance, it was said with great conviction, and I wanted to be very much part of this new phase in my life, this new country which I've adopted into. And I was very happy to say it. Born a Hindu, I came to America more of an agnostic than anything else. All my 4 kids born in America are nuns, like you say, agnostic, and they don't have any religious affiliation, nor did my wife and me try to indoctrinate them in any way. My question is about the guns which you were talking about. You were talking about Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom and Norway. They have very safe gun laws, etc. And the United States does not. But the socio-cultural background of all these 5 countries is basically the same. The narrative, the Judeo-Christian tenets and beliefs are basically the same. Why is it that the United States is now evolved in a different direction from the other 4?
That is a great question. And it's not, it's such a huge problem now.
Oh, I
Sorry.
didn't hear.
So if you're online,
Oh,
please mute your microphone so you don't overwhelm the speaker.
I don't know, what combination of that sort of individualist ethos, cynical power grab, by the National Rifle Association and right wingers sort of using guns as an issue. That's kind of like cowboy myth that we have. I don't know the answer to that. There are, I'm sure, great books about this question. Now I feel like, one of the major problems is how many guns there are in the U.S. And I will say that although school massacres and gun massacres in general are horrific and the moment kind of on the regular that we get to hear people in Congress offering thoughts and prayers versus, actual political answers. Although those are, that is the most dramatic case, but actually more gun deaths can happen for just having handguns in the house. So it's a huge problem. And I don't mean to say that it's a simple problem. Whatever differences began between our country and those countries, now, gun ownership just balloons with, when a Democrat is elected president, or when a massacre happens. It's just bizarre what kinds of disinformation and sort of identity politics are involved. But so I don't mean to make it sound simple at all. I do still believe it's something that we can fix. And so to me, it is just an incredible symbol of the way in which, humans in this country have abdicated or certain humans, not all humans, a lot of people working hard on this, have abdicated their responsibility. It's just a very potent thing. But I think that's an excellent question.
Thank you. Sherry in the room has a question. So hold it like an ice cream cone, Sherry.
I'm a bad ice cream cone holder. I really appreciated all the things you were saying about what atheists don't have to do. But I guess I do want to question you around this agnosticism versus atheism.
Sure.
Most of the people in this room know I did my PhD on Thomas Huxley, who invented the word agnostic. And most people sort of say, put agnosticism on this kind of, well, you know, the absolute believers, the absolute non-believers. And he was like, this idea of agnosticism is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
But he really did talk about it as the limits to knowledge of what we can investigate. And so you yourself said you can't absolutely prove that God does not exist. So for myself, probably partly because I'm this Huxley person, I would say I live my life as an atheist, essentially, but I would also still say I'm agnostic. And it was very interesting example, because I don't know if you know, when you mentioned about the little green men on Mars, actually Huxley wrote something specifically on that and said, well, they might exist there, but we have no way of knowing whether little green men live on Mars. So I'm agnostic on it. And so I still feel there's a lot of, in terms of political action or whatever, I guess for myself, I don't feel like I need to go out and speak as an atheist.
Right.
So I'm just, wondering about your thoughts about that.
Sure. I totally respect, well, first of all, I'm out of my depth with a Huxley scholar, but I totally respect the intellectual perspective that you're talking about, and that intellectual overriding sort of humility, intellectual humility, which I completely agree with. But I guess I feel like if we were all honest in the entire country, we are all, you know, believers and not believers, we're all agnostic. I mean, there is so much that people don't know. So I guess I feel like the word atheist, I prefer to use the word atheist because I feel like I'm at least as sure of that as people who use other words to, you know, to describe their religious beliefs. And in this country right now, I feel like it's incredibly useful to stand and represent someone who rejects the reality of all the different, you know, systems that rely on a supreme being, just to reject it, just to show that somebody, you know, pleasant and kind and community forward and all those things rejects it. And I realized that it, you know, that is making a political choice, which is less, you know, like a very fine philosophical choice. It's more a political choice, I feel like. And so that's kind of how I'm describing it, and that's why I choose it. But you know, as a matter of careful distinction, I would say everybody's an agnostic.
Thank you very much. Sherry, could you pass the microphone out to two rows? And
whose rows?
Two. But first, we have a comment in the chat from someone. How are we doing for time for you, Kate? Okay, so there's a comment here from Richard in Manhattan, who is a long comment in the chat if anyone wants to read it. Aya, could you unmute yourself and ask your question of our speaker?
Yes. Thank you, Kate. Very, very. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. It was a wonderful, wonderful talk. I was in the book house a while ago, but I really liked here that you brought your talk to the politics of today and the public policy. That I think that's so important. Also, you gave tools in a way what to say, because I had not a confrontation, but there were two gentlemen at my door just 2 weeks ago or something like that, and they said, "Do I know about God's realm and Bible?" And I said, "I'm an atheist," and it was thanks to you really that I was totally honest, and I said, I mean, I have always been, but
that's wonderful.
to say the words, I'm atheist, And that was so deliberating. And then I said, I appreciate the church, what it does. And I'm interested and I know about mythology, and it's a fictional and literary piece of work. And so that was, the gentlemen were very polite. They didn't continue. And I thought it was a very good, respectful meeting. But what I would like to say, one more thing, is that how the religion has, is the word usurped, taken over. For instance, you mentioned a lot about Christmas. This time of solstice, and I'm just thinking language-wise, I come from Scandinavia, and we don't have Christ in the name of the season at all. It's jul or yolo, and that comes really from the pagan solstice time. But how religion have taken over and used the pagan rituals and all other rituals for their own power. So that's but thank you very much for bringing
you're welcome.
the political, the public discourse. I think that's so important. What can we do? All right, thank you.
You know, in a world, in a perfect world, in a world where we weren't being assaulted,
in Christian nationalism, it wouldn't, you know, wouldn't be so urgent, I feel like, to sort of assert a different point of view. So I think the politics do matter. But as I said, that wasn't the book I started to write. And I feel like, just even on a personal level, it has been so rewarding just to be able to be honest with people in my relationships, especially my kids.
Thank you very much. Just a second. I have a comment. I'd like to make a comment to that too, respond further. I didn't say it earlier in the opening, but all the seasons this time of the year, they forget the real reason for the season is the solstice. And they all co-opted a great thing for their own silly needs. And next we have a question in the room, and I cannot remember your name. Could you introduce yourself?
My name's Steve. Thank you very much. Kate, great presentation.
Thank you.
Don, congratulations on getting this room. I might even come back. It's not 90 degrees in here like the other room. If you want an answer to gun violence, I hate to use bumper stickers for the answer to anything, but there is one bumper sticker that answers that. And we've all seen it. God, guns, and Trump. You don't need anything more than that. It's right there. God, guns, and Trump.
It's the God and gun thing.
But my question is,
fascinating.
And this has been bothering me, not bothering me, but it's a question I've had for some time, and I can't quite figure out the answer, even though I've asked a number of different people, and I bet you can give me the answer. Jewish people can be atheists. Christian people, by definition, cannot. Most of my Jewish friends are atheists. None of my Christian friends are, because they can't be. How can a Jewish person be an atheist, but a Christian person can't?
Becca knows the answer.
I can answer first too.
Yes, please. No,
Hold up. Get a microphone.
But
no, please do.
It's a two-part question, so I want the microphone back.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm sorry to usurp Kate's fantastic presentation, but this question is very close to my heart because I happen to be a Jewish atheist. The thing is that Jewishness is a very multi-aspected identity. And the ethnic identity is one part of it. The cultural identity is another part. And religious identity is only one aspect of being a Jew, right?
That's very well said. Like absolutely. Thank you. No, I think that's true.
So for many of us, we're either born Jews, as I was, or adopted Jewish culture, or choose to follow Jewish religion. Those are all three different things.
Right.
For a Christian, that is the identity.
Well, I would like to add to that too, please. No. I think that's a great answer. And I say that at the end of my book, I kind of urge people to take on that perspective, because it's true that as a Jew, I was
it was much easier for me to say that I'm an atheist. It's pretty easy to say. It's not uncommon to say that you're a Jewish atheist or an atheist Jew. And I want other people who do feel a cultural connection to the faith that they were raised in. And there are people who feel that, I know a lot of Catholics who feel very, like that Catholic identity is a part of them, even if they don't believe, 70% of what they're supposed to believe as Catholics. And so I'm trying to urge people to use atheists, to use the combination form, to be Catholic atheists, or, because it is true of Judaism, but I think it's also more true than we know of other religious beliefs too, that people feel that sense of identity and don't want to give it up.
So a Catholic person could be an atheist.
Well, I mean, can a Catholic person use birth control? I mean, they do. So, or they're.
Okay, my last question, because I don't.
I'm sure the Pope would not say a Catholic person can be an atheist.
Can you tell me?
Can I just?
Can
I just say something?
Sure.
But being Jewish is
the difference
also
between a Jewish
Ma'am, hold your own remote question. The conversation's here.
My last question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between somebody who's Jewish and somebody who's Hebrew?
Hebrew. I don't think anyone says they're Hebrew. That's an old.
Hebrew is not a religion?
Okay.
Well, then what is the difference between a Jewish person and a Zionist?
That's a political question.
We don't have time for that subject here. Okay, so thank you very much for your question. Pass the microphone back to Roland. We do have one question online that I think is very interesting.
I just have a couple comments.
Roland, please wait.
I'm sorry.
So a question online from Aiden, who asked, how do you teach life rules such as the 10 Commandments or Beatitudes to children without using religion? I would offer up AHA's 10 Commitments as a place to start. There are other things. Kate, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the 10 Commandments, because I think most of them are about just make sure you believe in me. Make sure you believe in me. You're in trouble if you don't believe in us. First 4. So only 6 are useful at all, and then they don't cover so many things. So I have a chapter on morality. Read my book. You will find out how I talk to my kids about it. But it's basically the golden rule. It's like, how would you feel if someone did this to you? Try not to do that. I mean, it's pretty simple. And I think even religious people, that's what they use. I don't know religious people who actually, consult the 10 Commandments or Leviticus or whatever it is, and then go from there to instructing their kids. They don't. They just think they do. So anyway.
Roland, I have one person online before you.
All right.
Then how are you doing for time after that? So up to you for time.
One online, Roland and Sue. Does that sound okay?
That's okay.
Oh, we're going to talk.
Okay, so Ron, you had a comment?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm an atheist, possibly an agnostic Jew. Didn't have a bar mitzvah or anything like that, but my kids did. My question is, with the comments yesterday, within the last couple of days, with Mike Johnson, talking about how God came to him and and told him how to govern, basically, and told him what to do. It reminds me, it's very scary that someone who thinks he's talking to God and he's telling him the right thing to do when we don't believe in God. But my question is that there is so many religions, there's hundreds of religions, and all of them are based on books, many of them based on books where we had humans say, this is what God's telling me. So this is what God is writing. I'm writing this book, based on what God has communicated to me, kind of like what Mike Johnson is saying. I don't, when I talk to people who are very, very ultra religious, including some family members who are born again Christians, other religions, they don't ever grasp the fact. I know I don't have to argue with them, but they try to convert me. And I mentioned that, these are people who say they hear God and writing this book, many things, horrible things in this book. I know there's a lot of good things in the book also, or these books, but they can't grasp the fact that humans have written these books. So how do you deal with that when you're talking to people who are trying, how do you deal with that?
I usually don't really focus on the human aspect of it so much as the fact that there's so much in there that people ignore. Even people who say everything I do is because of what the Bible says, they're still picking and choosing the verses that they focus on, that they are determined that everyone around them has to follow, versus ones that they don't. There's a reason why people choose the ones that are, a man shall not lie with a man versus, love thy neighbor. I mean, people, there's so much in them that to sort of claim that you are following biblical law is it's comical. And it's just evidence to me that people use religion for their own morality, for their own purposes, and not the other way around.
And then the second part of the question is, when you have politicians like during the Republican debate, they were very adamantly saying, most of them saying the Jewish population has to be recognized. We can't discriminate against them, all of that. Yet, I think most of them, or all of them, said, this is a Christian state. This is a Christian nation. It was just so incongruable that we have that, you know what I mean? That it's like here they are arguing half an hour ago about no discrimination. Then they're saying it's a Christian state, the Christian country.
It's scary. It's a scary time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question today. Our host is about running out of voice and been standing here a long time. Not our host, our speaker. The host has been sitting on here being lazy. But Sue, you had a question? Could you get the microphone? Okay, Roland.
Go ahead.
So couple quick points. When I became a humanist, one of the reasons was because an atheist is a theist.
Yeah.
But a humanist is good without a God. You have a moral code that you can live by and so forth. As far as the agnostic part of it goes, I've always prided myself in trying to keep an open mind. And when I talk to someone who's religious and so forth, it's like sometimes they have a closed mind and they have to, and if you come up with scientific points that are verifiable and so forth, they don't have an answer for it, but yet they believe that. And they don't have an open mind. And that's one of the things that I think needs to be brought out is, yeah, you can believe whatever you want, but try to keep an open mind. If we learn something new through astronomy or geology or whatever, we can change.
Right.
But in religious dogma, you can't, there are all these fantastic things that just can't.
Well, that's how I feel about atheism too, right? I'm an atheist with an open mind, and I'm completely open to evidence.
Really enjoy this.
Thank you. One more. I want Sue to ask.
Okay, I just want to bounce off of what Roland said because I was having some similar thoughts. I think there's a practical reason not to identify yourself as an agnostic if what you really are is an atheist. And that is that it gives people a lot of license to argue with you. It's like,
oh, right. Like you're tipping, I can push you over.
You know, if I say I'm an atheist, on the other hand, if you say you're an atheist, the response I get very often from people is that I'm closed-minded.
Well, yeah, well, maybe we should all say, that's the reason why militant atheist, and I don't think. But you don't have to be a militant atheist. That's the thing. You can be an atheist with an open mind, but this is all the evidence I have so far. This makes me an atheist.
Right.
Great.
I accept all evidence coming in. So, yeah.
Okay, great. I think we're going to cut off our conversation.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
I'm